You know what would be really punk rock?
No? What?
Subscribing to Mark, Will, and Tomek on Substack.
Oh, how can I do that?
Go to markwillwright.substack.com and tomekb.substack.com.
Okay, I will. But only because I want to, not because you told me to. Texting.
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 Texting. Texting. Texting. Texting. Texting.
Texting.
Texting.
Mark, Will, and Tomek present
Texting.
Hello, all you textual deviants, and welcome to another episode of Texting. I'm Mark, Will in Taipei.
and I'm Tomek in St. Petersburg.
Well, I'm sorry to tell you acid heads out there that I'm postponing those drug-related episodes because, in case you haven't heard, the monarch in Great Britain passed away, and so I thought it would be appropriate for us to consider the Sex Pistols song God Save the Queen. How about that?
Yep. As you know, I pushed back a little bit on this choice, but reluctant.
Tell us why.
Just because, well, I guess a variety of reasons, but none of them were out of some kind of deference to the Queen. It was more like I just felt so oversaturated with Queen-related news that that was my way of being defiant, I guess, was like, let's ignore it rather than feed it. But
That was your punk attitude about the whole thing.
yeah, exactly. That was my rebellious statement.
Tomek rotten.
Yeah, but also I just like, I like the podcast to emphasize beauty and rather than like cynicism. Although obviously cynicism can be beautiful and blah 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 blah. Either way, I totally think it's a valid topic, and I'm looking forward to talking about it. And that's not me just being conciliatory.
Well, but this was your first experience with the Sex Pistols. Did I mention that they're the artist? We're talking about the song God Save the Queen from the album Never Mind the Bollocks. Here's the Sex Pistols. And of course that's by the Sex Pistols. Did I already say that?
You may not have, so it's good that we've
yeah
clarified.
So was it your first time to listen to the Sex Pistols?
I doubt it. Like, it's probably unlikely that I made it to 39 without hearing the Sex Pistols. Obviously, I know the name, and I have vague associations with them and punk rock. But would I have been able to differentiate between the Sex Pistols and the Clash before this show? Probably not. So a very surface level awareness of the band, and yeah, I like the song.
Interesting.
I like the song.
Okay, so you like that particular track.
Yeah.
Did you listen to anything else on Never Mind the Bollocks? I know you sent me a text about the song Bodies.
Yeah.
Did you listen to that?
I did, and I gave the whole record one spin. Obviously, I could have given it more time, but I liked Anarchy in the UK.
That's my favorite track, actually.
Okay.
More so than God Save the Queen, but I picked God Save the Queen because, well, I've already explained why.
Sure. You were trying...
But any other highlights?
I can't really comment, no.
Okay. Well, let's talk specifically about God Save the Queen, and then we can get into some of the other issues related to punk and the cultural phenomenon that it represents.
Good.
one thing I guess we should point out is that it's kind of a parody, right? Like God Save the King, God Save the Queen. That's actually an official song of the British monarchy. And
I mean, it's the
didn't know
national
this.
anthem. God Save the Queen is the national anthem.
Okay.
Yeah. So like
Well,
it's sung
and-
at football matches, you know.
Okay, there you go. And I didn't know this, but apparently the American unofficial national anthem, My Country 'Tis of Thee, is just a ripoff of God Save the Queen, God Save the King. Did you know that?
That's crazy because now when I sing the melody in my head, of course it's the same, but I didn't put the two together. Yeah.
Yeah.
My country, yeah.
Yeah. So, once again, we see how the U.S. is like, a pathetic imitation of Great Britain
Yeah.
in more ways than one.
They're the unfriendly
We can get
countries.
into
You are
that
the
later.
unfriendly countries, according to my present regime. Stop being so damn unfriendly.
Well, don't blame me. They're not listening to me about it.
Okay.
But okay, so it's a parody, and as such, how seriously do we take this? I mean, some of my favorite phrases from Johnny Rotten's lyrics: "The fascist regime,
Yeah, I like that line.
they made you a moron, potential H-bomb." And then about the Queen herself, she ain't no human being.
Mm-hmm.
Our figurehead is not what she seems. Did I say that right? I want to say figurehead, but figurehead
Yeah, it sounds good.
is not what she seems. And then to complicate matters, at one point he says, "We mean it, man," which couldn't be more sarcastic. Any thoughts about the lyrics?
And also another notable couplet, I like "God Save the Queen, 'cause tourists are money." That's one of the cheaper defenses that's presented for preserving the monarchy.
That's such a great line for me, because you know what was going on at the time this was released, right? 1977.
Right.
It was the
Jubilee.
the silver jubilee for Queen Elizabeth II. Okay, so the 25th year of her rule, and you won't believe this, but my Anglophile mother went with, I think she went with her mother, my grandmother, to England in 1977.
Wow.
She left her two young children,
Starving on the streets of Houston.
yeah, in the care of her, negligent husband, my father, while she and her mother went to pay homage to Elizabeth II. It's crazy to me when I think. I remember very well. I was like in kindergarten or first grade around that time. I remember she went and she called us long distance. "Oh, we went to a parade," and blah blah. And then she came back with some memorabilia. And
So was that more from like a spirit of like fanboy, or was it an actual like reverence? I mean, was it like
oh, she's a fangirl, but she's obviously, well, I don't know if it's obvious, but she's also a proud American in the worst way, But like many Americans, she has this Anglophile streak, like, oh, they're so dignified, and it's pretty disgusting, actually. But what's crazy is that I remember that time, though, of course, I didn't have any knowledge of the Sex Pistols until much later. So it's funny to me when I think back to that period, because I was very much alive. My mom went there, and I just wonder, I'll have to ask her actually, like, did she hear anything on the news while she was over there about you heard about this, right? Like Malcolm McLaren, the Sex Pistols manager, chartered a boat.
Right. Yeah, I heard about
and
this.
and they went what, out on the Thames or something, and
yeah.
it was a chaotic disaster, but they were, trying to play God Save the Queen, and then they were intercepted by the Coast Guard, or I don't know. They got arrested. McLaren and Vivian Westwood, his girlfriend, who's now Dame Vivian Westwood. We can talk about her too, but I wonder if she was aware of that. I'll have to ask her, because she was definitely there at that time,
Right.
So it's who knows? Maybe she, walking along the Thames, heard the Sex Pistols playing, that would
I somehow doubt it. But
that would be awesome.
it would be, but I don't know. Was it that successful that it really was like broadcasted to people outside?
Well, they did everything they could to shut it down, but they were plugged in and playing, so some people near the water probably heard something.
Right.
But anyway, the Jubilee, and it's great that the timing was perfect, right? Like, it's the perfect time for punk to happen when the Monarch is having her 25th anniversary, her silver jubilee.
Almost too perfect in a sense. Like when I read about the details of the album's initial release with one record label, I can't remember which was the first record label, and then they were dropped. EMI. Then they were dropped because of some feud, and then Richard Branson picked them up for Virgin.
Yes.
So I mean, when I say it was almost like too neat, it's like then Branson was like, we got to get this out for the Jubilee. So then you start to see it a bit more cynically, like this is just this is just a marketing opportunity, rather than like the ultimate punk protest.
That's all it ever was. Malcolm McLaren has been, well, he's dead now, but while he was alive, he was very frank about it. I mean,
sure, but from the perspective of the Sex Pistols, it was authentic. I mean, the message, right?
Well, even that, it's hard to say. I mean, you listen to Johnny Rotten now talk about it. He always contradicts himself, says a lot of stupid shit, in my opinion. But, I mean, we can get into that later as well.
Okay.
But remember, he, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, he was like doing commercials for some butter company that had the Union Jack on it or something. I mean, but remember, the Sex Pistols movie was called The Great Rock and Roll Swindle or something like that, and they had a compilation album called Filthy Lucre or something like that, or Back for More Cash. I mean, they were always quite open about the fact that they were selling out. There was something almost Warholian about it,
Yeah, you can speak to that better than I can. But in an interview I watched more recently, he was still very critical of record companies, for example, and
Lydon or Johnny Rotten.
Johnny Rotten, right?
Yeah,
and he still seemed like he was very much invested in a spirit of counterculture and individualism. So I'm just adding that.
Wait, he was critical of it, or he was?
He was critical of big record companies. He's still very because he was actually being interviewed by a really well-known hip-hop interviewer named Sway. I don't know if you've heard of him, but anyway, he felt himself absolutely allied with the birth of hip-hop before it also became too commercial, and yeah, he very much felt like he had a chip on his shoulder towards mainstream or commercial ventures in music. I mean, he was coming off like a purist, and that's how he wanted to portray himself.
I see. Well, I mean, he's a complicated figure,
Sure.
or should I say figure. uh, I like a lot of what he did after the Sex Pistols with Public Image Limited, or PIL, PIL.
Okay.
That's like post-punk stuff, which in many ways is more interesting than punk itself. I know that you're a Joy Division fan,
Yeah, massive,
and so am I.
Massive.
So am I. And that came much later. Like, I didn't even discover Joy Division actually until I was in Korea. I think it was with the release of that Ian Curtis biopic. That's when they appeared on my radar. I had heard of them, but never really listened. So we can talk about that as well. But let's get back to the lyrics before we venture off into these other territories. Any other key phrases or anything?
Well, also, let's make sure that we make some time for your Sex Pistols origin story as well. I mean, we can do that after the lyrics, but you asked me how.
Sure.
Yeah, so I'd be curious to know.
Yes, I remember it very clearly.
I guess if we're just still on the level of text, then it's an interesting note that even the title was sort of shoveled in. There's another word for that when something is forced in. There's a cooler expression. But anyway.
By whom? By McLaren?
Exactly, yeah. So the original title was No Future, which...
Oh.
And that was the emphasis of the song.
Right.
So...
Well, apparently, I remember reading this long ago when I first got into the Sex Pistols. Apparently, McLaren would give them songwriting assignments,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the most interesting results was this song Submission. So he said, "Okay, boys, go write a song called Submission," and he had in mind something, some S&M theme.
I did
right?
see something about this on a documentary I watched this week.
Yeah, but the actual song is about a submission, like a submarine mission.
Right.
So Rotten later said that was all about taking the piss out of Malcolm McLaren. So he thought it was like a high concept art rock S&M anthem or something, and then they said, "Okay, here's your fucking submission. We're going down, down under the water. We're going down, down under the sea," or something like that. Not the best song on the album, but it shows that I don't know, that adventurousness, that willingness to just flout all convention. And there are a lot of tracks like that on Nevermind the Bollocks, like things that I had never heard in popular music before that. I mean, I was quite young when I discovered them, but it was all new to me, and I liked it very much.
One little quote from JR about Malcolm McLaren. "I hate that fucker, a credit hopper." And by credit hopper, he means like he takes the credit for other people's originality. And he was actually speaking specifically about Malcolm McLaren's, one of his singles called like Buffalo Girls, I believe.
Buffalo
Gals, which he said was like a ripoff of, I don't remember who he cited, but anyway.
Well, he that's one of the first records to feature scratching.
Okay.
And yeah, it seems like he probably did, rip off the music, and then he just sang or I don't know if he even sings. Maybe he just like does a kind of spoken word thing over the music. I mean, I'm not a big fan of his music personally.
Here's one more nice quote about the actual text itself. This is from a music journalist named Simon Wells.
Mm-hmm.
He calls the text, he says, "It's a lament for Britain if someone like Philip Larkin had written it and put it in a poetry book, they'd say, yes, that's very astute. So
Yeah,
I
mean,
that.
there's an anthemic quality about it. It's a great sing along, you know. Just imagine a hall full of people singing in chorus, "No future for you, no future for me." England's dreaming. I mean, but it has that pessimistic, nihilistic message, but the music is so uplifting, you know. I mean, it's a great rock track.
Absolutely. It's really charged, catchy. Yeah, it makes you want to sing along.
Yeah. So that adds to the richness of the text and the ambiguity, the ambivalence we feel about its message.
What did you think about the lines? Don't be told what you want. Don't be told what you need. How do you interpret that?
Well, that's the punk attitude. It's like someone described it as press the self-destruct button and start over. You know, like no one's gonna tell us anything.
Yeah, okay.
And that the punk DIY ethic is a wonderful thing, right? Like the whole point was, fuck all these classic rock dinosaurs with their 10-minute guitar solos and their complicated arrangements. We don't even know how to play our instruments, but we're gonna get on stage and do our thing, and fuck you if you don't like it.
Yeah.
In fact, we hope you don't like it. You know. That is one of the great things that McLaren did. I saw a documentary of him. He was talking about a tour of the States they did, which was a total disaster. He booked them at a place in Texas, actually. I can't remember where, but I think they opened for Merle Haggard or something, which is crazy, you know. And they played at a place called Randy's Rodeo, and when he tells the story, it's just so fucking funny. Like this was after Matlock had left the group. They already had Sid Vicious, and people were, I think they were throwing hamburgers at Sid Vicious. It was like a country western crowd or something.
Right.
They wanted to hear some Hank Williams or something, and here comes the Sex Pistols, and they were throwing hamburgers at Sid Vicious, and of course he hit someone over the head with his bass, and I think they got arrested or something. But after all of that, McLaren was unrepentant. He said, you should go where you're hated.
It sounds like Sacha Baron Cohen ethos, like Bruno going into some cowboy bar, You know that character of Bruno, right?
I do, yeah.
Or even, who's the guy who Jim Carrey portrayed? The comedian who played the wrestler.
Oh, Andy Kaufman.
Yeah, like Andy Kaufman going into like a wrestling vibe, right? I mean, he's getting that kind of like triggering sensation from the crowd.
Well, I think someone like Andy Kaufman and McLaren have similar influences, right? Like I know McLaren was very much influenced by the French Situationists.
Yeah, I read that.
Yeah, so he's like trying to be provocative, trying to elicit reactions, which can be a good thing. But I don't know if it's very situationist to get rich off of it, like he did, and commercialize it. It's kind of I don't know. What do you think about that? I mean, consider Vivienne Westwood, right? Like she was his punk girlfriend. They have a store which they name Sex. That was the name of the store, hence Sex Pistols, right? Like originally, the band was just like the official. They were like the mascots of the store where they're selling this punk clothing, and so she's designing and selling these clothes that are like torn and have safety pins or whatever, right?
Right.
And then she gets arrested at the Jubilee. She's punk, right? Look at her now. She's like Dame. She's like royalty herself.
Yeah, I mean, when I hear Vivienne Westwood, I just put it in the same category as like Versace, you know?
Yes, but this is who she was. This is her origin.
Right.
And she later said she never really cared for McLaren. I've heard her say that. Of course, she contradicts herself too, but you wonder, was it all calculated? Like you put on this rebel performance just to get rich? I mean, who knows? I do like the fact that I'm talking about Vivienne Westwood now. I do like the fact that she's been a very vocal supporter of Julian Assange, so good on her for that.
Fair play.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as like whether I guess my criteria for all that would be like, if the art itself is interesting and beautiful, that's like the main criteria for how I would perceive all that, you know?
Do you like her clothing?
I have no opinion.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't really have an opinion either.
Yeah.
I've never... does she make clothes for men? I mean, I guess she did at one time. Now, I don't know.
I'm a fan of the American
Probably
Jewish
she
fashion
does.
of Levi Strauss.
No, there you go.
Anyways.
Or it's Western variation, Wrangler.
Yes.
Yeah, well, what should we talk about next? If we're still on the topic of the music, I want to mention this. Glenn Matlock, okay, this guy who either quit or was kicked out of the band, it's not really clear to me. He wrote most of the music. I mean, I'm convinced of that. And he was completely ostracized and he got no credit. He was on that famous TV show with the drunken host that Steve Jones called a dirty fucker.
Yeah, I've watched that clip like at least 8 times preparing for this.
It's so hilarious.
It is, but I keep wanting like something else. I kind of feel like
you dirty fucker.
You dirty fucker.
You dirty old man.
Yeah, it's so good.
And you know who's there with them, right? What, like one of the girls what's that guy's name? Bill Gundy or something?
Bill Grundy.
One of the Grundy.
Yeah.
Grungy. So he's like, one of the girls that's with them says, "Oh, I've always admired you," and he's like, "So we should meet afterwards, right?" You know who that girl is?
No.
That's Susie Sue of Susie and the Banshees.
Ah, wow, okay.
So she was part of their punk circle before she got on stage herself. I mean, she was like, I think they called themselves the Bromley Contingent. Like they were just a group of punks that were fans of the Sex Pistols. Like all of them. I mean, Joy Division, that's how they started. They were Sex Pistols fans. Like they met at a Sex Pistols show, and then all of those kids were like, "Hey, we should start our own band."
Yeah, I think I wrote down today in my notes about punk. In December 1976, the English fanzine Sideburns published a now famous illustration of 3 chords captioned, "This is a chord, this is another, this is a third. Now form a band."
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a great thing. That's that DIY ethic that I think is so valuable. I mean, maybe that's punk's greatest contribution.
Mm-hmm.
Just the fact that, you can do it too. Just go do it.
Right.
Just do it, as Nike says.
The goddess, Nike.
Yes, the goddess of victory.
Yeah.
What else about the lyrics? Anything else? Oh, did I did I finish saying I'm all over the place? I know, but
That's okay.
Glenn Matlock, right?
Right.
He wrote most of these songs, and I don't know. Maybe in recent years he's gotten some songwriting credits and hopefully some royalties, but I know he wrote the music. The others, I mean, Rotten doesn't play an instrument. Steve Jones is a good, rock rhythm guitarist, but I don't think he was composing. And Paul Cook, the drummer, I don't think he wrote anything. Maybe he contributed to some lyrics. Sid Vicious, he couldn't even fucking play the bass.
Right.
So Matlock was the one writing most of the music. Now Rotten, I think he's primarily responsible for the lyrics, if not completely responsible. But, Matlock, you know why they kicked him out or why he quit? I think he was kicked out, basically. They said he kept talking about the Beatles. He liked the Beatles too much.
Right.
And see, that was not punk. That was not punk enough.
Apparently, by the way, he's now, since 2022, he's been with Blondie. Just interesting.
Matlock?
Yeah.
Okay, well, she was part of that scene in New York. I mean, we can talk about the New York scene. Which came first, the New York punks or the London punks? The answer is the New York punks, because you had the Ramones and the New York Dolls. They preceded the Sex Pistols, and the Damned and those others. I think that's McLaren was in New York. I think he managed the New York Dolls.
Yeah, that's
for
right.
a brief
That's
period.
right.
So see, he already had that idea from what he had seen in New York, and then he goes back to London. Hey, let's start something like that here, and he picks the kids that are hanging around his store. Oh, this crazy nihilistic fucker, John Lydon. He could be like an anti-front man.
He could be a figurehead.
A figurehead.
Yeah.
So, okay, since you asked about my origin story, maybe this is a good time to bring it up. So, when I discovered them, I was into 60s rock, classic rock, Beatles, Pink Floyd, Beatles, Pink Floyd, Beatles, Pink Floyd. That's all I listened to. And then, before I quit high school, every day I would just skip class, go to the library, read either books on psychedelics or rock bios or Rolling Stone magazine. That's what I would do every day.
Nice.
And so, it must have been 1986 or 87. And you know how Rolling Stone does like the top 500 albums of all time or whatever?
They constantly updated it, yeah.
Yeah, they always change it. But at that time, mid to late 80s, number one was Sgt. Pepper. Okay. I'm very familiar with that. That was like
very safe choice.
Already part of my musical DNA at that point, and I knew it very well, along with most of the Beatles' other material. Number two was something called Never Mind the Bollocks, Here's the Sex Pistols.
Wow.
Number two, it's saying, and I've never heard this. I had heard of it, and I'd seen, like the iconic album cover with that like hostage letter font. So I went out and bought the cassette, and also on that list was the Velvet Underground and Nico,
nice,
which I hadn't heard. That was number 3 or something. So I got both of those albums, and it really changed everything about my musical approach. Like, it really opened things up for me.
Like, it liberated you in some way.
It did. Like, I was you know, there was something too. It's like, you know how certain Latin American authors are infatuated with Faulkner, like they worship Faulkner, and so someone, it may have been Garcia Marquez, they're like, so how do you get over this? How do you cure yourself of your Faulknerian idolatry or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is read Hemingway.
Okay.
And someone else, I think Raymond Carver or someone said something similar, like first read Faulkner and then clean all the Faulkner out of yourself by reading Hemingway. So it's kind of like that, you know.
Right, it was like a palate cleanser for you.
It's a palate cleanser, exactly. So yes, of course, listen to the Beatles, listen to Pink Floyd, and, you know, make them your masters. But then, to get a different perspective, to cleanse the palate, to like reboot yourself, listen to the Sex Pistols and the Velvet Underground for, you know, a completely different experience. Before that, I remember thinking, like, you know, everything I did had to live up to the standards of the White Album, or I don't know, Wish You Were Here, or Animals, or The Wall, or something like that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, at that time, I was listening to earlier Pink Floyd, but whatever. Like, they were the gold standard. They were like the highest possible. They were what I should aim for, you know,
right, and
musically.
I can see how any high school aspiring musician would feel intimidated by like a sound as layered as Pink Floyd's.
Yeah. But you know, that's what we were aspiring to.
Sure.
But then
even on an equipment level, right? That's difficult for someone who's on a low budget. I mean, you don't have the studio access to get a sound like Pink Floyd's.
Well, but you know, we were playing at that time. We were playing around with pedals,
okay,
for the guitar, and so, and I had a keyboard too. So,
but you weren't employing like black choirs as backup singers and.
Well, I wanted to. Actually, we had a song I wanted to, like, it was insane. I wanted to, like, hire an elementary school choir, you know, because I had a song that I thought would sound good if there was a children's choir. Like,
we don't need no.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like Another Brick in the Wall or something.
Right.
Completely insane. I remember I called a friend of my mom's who was she worked at an elementary school, and I was like, so we want to have about 20 kids come to the studio, and she's like, well, are you going to pay them? And they would really like to get the credit. It's like, oh shit, this is not going to work. But anyway, excuse me. Hearing the Sex Pistols and the Velvet Underground just showed me that there are other possibilities, you know. And so it was a palate cleanser, and I became obsessed with both of them, Sex Pistols and Velvet Underground. So much so that I started, like, when we would do shows, I started, like, aping Johnny Rotten. Like, in my singing, my vocal, my stage presence, I would start, like, insulting the audience.
How did that come off?
It was ridiculous, man. We played, like, a 4th of July picnic, and I was, like mocking the audience. They're just a bunch of beer drinking Texans, you know.
Right.
And I'm, like, trying to go Sex Pistols on them. It was insane.
Effective?
Not at all.
Yeah.
Completely ridiculous.
Well, good on you for trying.
Well, maybe. It was pretty absurd. But yeah, that's the origin story.
Nice, man. So, what do you think of the album as a whole? Because I haven't really given it many spins. Is it an album that really, like, stands, like, for you?
It's
Is it
a
something
great.
you revisit?
It's a great album.
Okay.
I haven't listened to it in a long time. I do think it's overrated. It's not the second best album of all time.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it may not even be the greatest punk album. You know, you could make an argument for one of the early Ramones albums. Is it Rocket to Russia or Leave Home or one of those? Also, you know,
What about the Dead Kennedys?
the Dead Kennedys. Yes, I
Do you have
started
any
listening
opinions
to
on them?
Yes, I mean, around this same period, I started getting into their stuff as well, along with Frank Zappa.
I don't know them well, but like some friends I had back at uni, they were like really big fans, especially like of Jello Biafra.
Yeah,
Anyway,
sure.
we
Yeah.
can maybe think about that some other time.
Well, yes, Holiday in Cambodia. I had one of those records on cassette. Give Me Convenience or Give Me Death. I mean, they were great satirists, you know.
So did you ever go to punk shows or like identify with punk as a fashion? I mean, what's the closest you got to punk as an overall?
Well, so before that I had, you know, a hippie hairstyle. I just basically had long blonde. This was back when I had hair.
All good.
Yeah.
Bald is punk.
Yes.
Keeping bald. Staying bald is punk.
It would later become that, but, you know,
Sure.
that was back when I had an option.
Right.
Either, you know, shave the head or not. So I had long blonde hair down to my ass almost, you know, halfway
Damn.
down my back. And after after I got into punk, I remember for some reason, maybe I got stoned, but I took these rubber bands and tied up my hair into like 25 little pigtails,
Right.
I guess.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like
I have a picture in my head.
just imagine like tying up your hair with 25 rubber bands.
Right, it's almost like
just-
a cheap version of dreadlocks or something.
Yeah. With my wispy, thin, you know, blonde white boy hair.
Okay.
And then I put on like.
But why were you blonde? You're not blonde, are you? Or
I was.
Okay, your
I
hair
was.
your color just changed, yeah? Just darkened. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, if you see pictures of me as a boy, I'm like platinum blonde.
Damn.
My brother and I both were. So, yeah, by this time it was starting to, you know, brown a little bit. It was honey-colored tresses.
I'm sure
Not
those-
really tresses. It's just like, you know, like straw. Honey-colored straw. So anyway, I tied it up with these rubber bands, and then I put on I borrowed my friend's hat. I was living with my friend at this time, and he had like not a trilby or fedora like what I wear now. That's my trademark now, but it was like a bigger hat, not quite a cowboy hat, but kind of
like a Neil Young vibe.
Yeah, or like an Indiana Jones type hat, you know, like a Raiders of the Lost Ark hat.
Or
Like
what's the Aerosmith guy? Like a Steve Tyler hat?
I've never seen him wear a hat, but maybe. Anyway, so
Bro, he wears like shitloads of hats.
He wears scarves and
He wears like
necklaces.
wizard hats. He wears like just Google Steve Tyler hat. You're gonna get like
Okay,
a
it wasn't a
fucking
wizard
shitload.
hat.
Okay.
It wasn't a wizard
I'm
hat.
just saying.
It was a. You can imagine, right? A Raiders of the Lost Ark hat.
Okay,
It looked like I was gonna go fucking excavate an Egyptian mummy or something.
Okay.
So I put that on, right? And I met my friend, and we went to the mall. And
You went to Hot Topic. Sorry.
yes, we probably did go to Hot Topic. And on the way back, I looked at my friend and I just pulled the hat off, and he almost like ran the car off the road. He's like, "What the fuck?" Because it was quite a change. So that was my punk look, you know.
Okay.
but I never like wore safety pins or any of that. I was still like wearing my hippie uniform with the denim jacket and jeans and probably like a Jimi Hendrix t-shirt or something. But I did do that experiment with the hair.
Okay.
And then I kind of became like new wave. Like I cut off all the long hair. I don't know why I did that, but I had like 2 pictures of before and after, and I showed my Canadian friend. He's like, "Oh man, that makes me sad. You went from Led Zeppelin to Wham."
Nice.
I was like, "Oh yeah, maybe so."
I'd say that's a positive progression in terms of fashion, but anyway.
Well, yeah, that was his take on it. I'm neutral about it, but I probably tend to agree more with him. Anyhow, where are we now?
We can possibly discuss the lyrics a little bit more. You also wanted to possibly tie in the Smiths, Queen is Dead.
There's an interesting tie-in there. There's a through line, okay?
Go for it.
So, the Jubilee. Do you remember... I'm not sure you were with me, but in Korea there was a Derek Jarman film festival.
Yeah, I remember that.
Did you see Jubilee?
I don't know. I remember I watched the Tempest. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So as part of that film festival, they showed Jubilee, which I thought was fantastic.
By the way, shout out to one of our most loyal listeners, Maria, because I know she went to the Derek Jarman Fest, and yeah,
that's right.
She's also a Sex Pistols fan.
Oh, is she?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, I don't remember who else attended the showing of Jubilee, but I loved it. I'd never heard of it, so I was very thrilled to discover that. And it's quite satirical about the punks. Like it's quite critical of the punks. And in fact, Westwood got her panties in a wad about it and wrote an open letter to him because he basically, focused on like the violent fascistic tendencies of punk.
Okay.
So I'm glad he pushed back on that. It's like some of these punks are punk ass bitches.
Interestingly, the film was scored by Brian Eno. I'm reading.
I didn't. I don't know if I was aware of that at the time, but when I looked it up again today, I saw that. Very interesting. But it's a really good film. I quite enjoyed it. It's a cult classic, an underground film. I mean, there's some outrageous stuff that happens, and I was mesmerized by that. Okay, so what's the through line? Derek Jarman directed the Smiths video for The Queen is Dead.
Okay.
So, he, and, the Smiths, I think Morrissey famously said that he wanted to be as punk as the Sex Pistols, but as popular as the Beatles.
Nice.
So he wanted to like have the punk ethic, but he wanted to take that to the mainstream, or at least have the same accessibility as the Beatles. Anyway, maybe you could argue that maybe the Smiths succeeded in that regard. I don't know, but Jarman directed a lot of music videos, and so he sort of started in that punk era of the late 70s, and then into the 80s he was still doing these music videos. So that's a nice connection.
Do you have more that you want to say about that song in particular?
Well, the title is taken from a famous story in the Hubert Selby novel Last Exit to Brooklyn.
I read that. Mm-hmm.
You read the book?
No, I read.
You read about the...
Yeah,
okay.
that's right,
Yeah. I recently discovered Hubert Selby. I read all his novels, like one after the other. He's amazing. I had no idea. I would say Last Exit to Brooklyn is his best book, but I read also The Demon, The Room, Requiem for a Dream. You like that movie, right?
Sure.
Yeah. The book is probably my least favorite of his, but it's worth reading. I mean, I really had no idea. I'd heard about him. Last Exit to Brooklyn, incredible. And there's the story, The Queen is Dead, is amazing. So that, it's actually not about Elizabeth II, but you can associate it with her if you like.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know, I'm just going to share some more trivia.
Sure.
Okay, so they signed with Virgin Records, right?
Mm-hmm.
Richard Branson. And the album is like banned because of obscenity. It has the word bollocks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they hire a lawyer to defend the record company, to defend Virgin.
Okay.
Who's the lawyer? John Mortimer, author of the Rumpole of the Bailey novels, and then later BBC TV series. Did you ever see that? Rumpole of the Bailey?
No idea even what that is.
Okay, well, anyway. It's pretty good. It's entertaining. Rumpole is an old lawyer for the defense, played by, I think, Leo McKern. But it's basically autobiographical. John Mortimer wrote these novels based on his experiences as a barrister in the UK. And he was actually the representative of Virgin Records. He defended the Sex Pistols. So Rumpole, this old, 50, 60-year-old English barrister, is based on the guy who defended the Sex Pistols. That's an interesting bit of trivia.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe doesn't mean as much if you've never seen it. See, I saw my Anglophile mom always had fucking PBS on, right?
Sure.
So all of these
that's
British...
a credit to her, to be fair.
Well, back then, maybe.
Some of the best programming in American TV is probably from PBS.
Back then, that was maybe true, but since then, PBS has been bought out by the corporations, by the military-industrial complex, so it's a bunch of bullshit. But yeah, back then you had Rumpole the Bailey, you had Are You Being Served? Have you ever seen that?
Nope.
Okay. Of course, Mystery with Diana Rigg. You don't know what I'm talking about.
No idea,
this
bro.
This is before your time. Anyway, maybe some of the... Did they show Monty Python on PBS? Maybe not. But anyway, yeah, so... I don't know why we're talking about my Anglophile mom. Because of the Jubilee.
Right.
Okay, so...
Do you want to say anything about the Queen and the reaction to...
Okay, yes. I've seen some videos about this, the funeral and...
Did you watch anything?
No, fuck no. And the what, has Charles already been crowned or what? Has he had his coronation
I think so.
or whatever?
I don't know.
Okay.
No, yeah, I assume so.
I mean,
though. Maybe not.
That there's no excuse for it. That's my opinion. That shit has got to go. I mean, we talked about the Pope and whether the Pope is necessary. In my opinion, no. But this monarchy, the royal family, what the fuck, man? Do you know Charles? I saw. Who knows if it's true? I think it's probably true. I mean, forget about. We don't even need to mention Andrew. Like, we all know about that motherfucker, right? But Charles allegedly has his shoelaces ironed and his pajamas ironed. And when he goes hunting and comes back, he expects soft boiled eggs that are, that have not been boiled for, that have not been taken out for more than 3 minutes. So when they find out that he's coming, they start boiling the eggs and they just throw them away until he arrives. Then they can serve it 3 minutes out of the fucking pot.
Why every time you say he's coming, like, am I imagining a different type of coming? But anyway.
Yeah, he's probably doing that too. And he wants...
Into the soft core center of the egg.
Yeah, there you go. He wants soft boiled... Is it boiled? Maybe it's scrambled. I don't know. He's got to have his fucking eggs a certain way with scotch, And then, I mean, you saw the video. He's supposed to sign something, and he sees a pen that he doesn't like on the desk, and he just flings it away. And
the grimace is so nice, though.
It's like, get that shit out of here.
I love that grimace.
You fucking peasant.
It's fantastic.
I mean, why is that tolerated? Why? It's
I went to
outrageous.
I went to this British pub quiz because there's still like a relatively decent expat community, which I didn't realize, but I've tapped into here in St. Petersburg. Mm-hmm. And
British expat, you mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. So there's this British pub quiz. I even sent you that photo, right? Of like the different. Right. Yeah. So, anyways,
I could have helped with some of those.
Absolutely.
I'm the pub quiz king. Remember?
That's true. You are. So, anyways, they had someone speak right before the quiz started, who has an official status. I guess maybe he works for like the Moscow branch, because there's no longer an embassy in St. Petersburg. That was shut down a few years ago. But I think there's still some sort of presence in Moscow. Mm-hmm. And he started by like relaying the British values that we all share, and I guess it was okay. Like, he said like community and togetherness, but anyway, then he like went on this like odd reverence for the Queen and stuff, and it's just like, I hate when stuff like that is stated, like we should all be of one voice, right, in concert, and that's like the thing.
There's just an assumption that we all agree with that fucking nonsense,
and that's what seems to be like the dominant reaction the whole time with this. It's like, I actually think a lot of people don't agree, and it's like all of it. I mean, we know that top down exists in various contexts of media and government and so on. That relationship, that dynamic, that direction obviously is like a major part of existence, but you don't really see it necessarily that blatantly sometimes, where it's just like the top telling you, right? It's like, that's just weird in a moment, and especially coming from democratic countries where
allegedly democratic countries.
Right, but like the media's will usually present itself somewhat adversarially. Again, I'm not denying that there's a lot of like illusion in that, but especially just aesthetically for the British media, they're not usually like so subservient. So it was just really weird to.
But aren't they? I mean, they're confrontational within limits.
Right, but I'm just talking about the aesthetic. Let's forget about like the actual the reality of it. But just the aesthetic was such a change for me, or like again, I hate even referring to The Guardian, but like The Guardian as a big air quotes liberal newspaper, just like, just the way that their front pages looked for that week with just zero
just
questioning. It's bizarre. Coverage. Like, you get it from like the Telegraph, or the more right-wing newspapers, but a left-wing newspaper doing that.
But left has become right. I mean, everything is so far to the right that there is no left. There's no left. I mean, if you're talking about the Guardian, like
I'm just surprised that like that all of the institutions are in harmony about the monarchy. You know, I'd almost think that some institutions, official institutions, wouldn't even want the monarchy. You know, I didn't realize that there was such like that the monarchy had such a universal grip over media, for example. You know,
it's really unbelievable. Actually, just about an hour before we turned on the mics here, a video of Robert Smith of the Cure popped up on my YouTube. You can search that on YouTube. Robert Smith on the monarchy. His comments are fantastic. He's like, who are these fucking people? Like, how can anyone accept a lordship or a title from these people? Like, you're gonna honor me? What have you ever done? Who are you to honor me or anyone else? It's ridiculous. And how can you accept it? And then I think of like Sir Paul McCartney and Sir Mick Jagger and
Sir Elton John.
Kind of embarrassing, you know.
Yeah,
like,
man.
why the fuck would you accept that? Next is going to be Sir John Lydon, you know.
Right.
That would be irony of ironies, right? Like the perfect co-optation of that. You can officially say punk is dead and buried. Not that it isn't already dead, but oh, by the way, you found something interesting about the word history there, the etymology of punk. You want to share that?
Sure. I mean, I just ripped that off of Wikipedia, but it just says that between the late 16th and the 18th centuries, punk was a common coarse synonym for prostitute. William Shakespeare used it with that meaning in The Merry Wives of Windsor and Measure for Measure. Did you remember coming across that word in those texts?
I do not remember that, but I want to look it up.
Right,
that's
exactly.
Great. You know, there's the word assassination occurs in Shakespeare. I think it's in Macbeth. And you know, some people say that like the word assassin is derived from hashish, like hashashin, people who smoke hashish, right?
I thought assassin has some Arabic roots or Persian roots.
It is. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hashish has Arabic, Persian, whatever. That kind of origin or derivation.
Right. But I've heard that term from some kind of like secret sect that I don't remember, but I've learned about that term before.
Hey, read my new book coming out later next week.
Okay.
Actually, by the time this airs, it will have already been out, I think.
Good luck coming out in Russia, bro.
I've got an... Will it
Sorry.
be... Do you have Amazon there?
No, I'm making a joke about the coming out.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Do you have Amazon there, though? No? Yeah, you can... You've downloaded one of my books from Russia before.
We have VPN, bro.
Okay, so you can get it. Anyhow, there's a narrative called Assassin, and it talks about all of this. But, you know, some people have looked at this usage, and there's something in the sonnets, too. There's some reason to suspect that Shakespeare may have smoked hash and or opium. Some South African archaeologists found an opium pipe in Stratford, and then there are some textual clues related to this. But anyway, you want to find out more about it, buy my book. I don't go into the details related to Shakespeare, but you can find out about assassins. Okay, so what was the later meaning of punk? There was something else.
Yeah, the final sentence was just the term eventually came to describe a young male hustler, a gangster, a hoodlum, or a ruffian.
And then what about, I don't know, maybe this is just an American meaning, right? But like apathic homosexual in prison, like the
Apathic?
prisoner.
What do you mean apathic?
The one who gets fucked in the ass
Okay, thank you.
is called a punk, right?
Okay, I didn't know that, no.
Yeah, isn't that like the prison term? I'm gonna punk that bitch. You make someone your
I've heard
bitch.
like you punk bitch.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's the idea. It's the the bottom in the prison relation, in the prison
coupling.
sexual relationship. So
Intertwining.
that meaning, and I think they reappropriated it. I think that meaning was already understood in the mid 70s, late 70s, and maybe that came from like, the New York scene. I don't know, but it reminds me of the term Clockwork Orange, which, those droogies are kind of proto-punks, aren't they? And apparently, according to Anthony Burgess, that was a term for male homosexual. Clockwork Orange. I don't know why. But,
okay. Interesting.
So it's kind of like,
because droog means friend in Russian.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Clockwork Orange, like punk, originally it was an insult, right? But then it was adopted as a badge of honor.
Mm. Fair play.
Yeah.
Do you want to say anything about that American academic who criticized the monarchy but also had that interesting take on the Revolutionary War?
Oh, Dr. Gerald Horne of...
Do you want to shout him out?
Yes, I do. I've not read any of his books, but I've, seen many of his interviews. Dr. Gerald Horne, he's the professor of what? I think history and African American studies at University of Houston, and he's the author of The Counter-Revolution of 1776. And so his theory, as I've heard him explain it, is that the reason the colonists revolted against the motherland, against Great Britain, is because slavery was being outlawed in Great Britain and all the colonies. And so the American colonists were like, well, we want to keep our slaves, so let's have a revolution.
Right.
Which is, a fascinating thesis.
Right.
It's like, yeah, we don't want to hear about all your noble sentiments. Okay, we know why you really did it. You wanted to keep your slaves.
Yeah.
So I've heard his lectures and his interviews, and he's quite convincing. I've not read the book. I mean, his books are tomes, 600-700 pages. Maybe I'll read it one day, but thus far I haven't. I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of his theory just listening to him. Mm-hmm. But, he also was recently interviewed because he said, the ultimate white supremacist is the Queen, and now King Charles. The British monarchy, historically, they're history's greatest white supremacists. So what, he's supposed to admire them, or why should any of us admire them or respect them or defer to them? It's absurd. The whole thing is absurd. Like all the stuff, the crown, I mean, everything they have, they stole. It's all stolen.
And it's the level of pomp and circumstance. Is that the expression?
Yes.
But it's just so weird that people found that aesthetic moving, right? Like it's just so gaudy, like, and that's supposed to like represent us at our kind of finest moment. It's with all these guys like parading around like buffoons in you know, in monkeys costumes. It's really strange that this is what's gonna make people moved. You know, like it's the opposite of like subtlety, and usually what's more moving is something, you know, much more humble. I mean, that's the like kind of the least likely aesthetic to make me emotional, you know.
Well, but as I think,
Like I get it, it's you know, yeah. Go on.
Well, as Russell Brand pointed out, you know, there's something archetypal about it. Like the queen is like a Near Eastern mother goddess or something.
Mm-hmm.
So people are making these deep psychological Jungian archetype connections.
You know, and I'd like to leave some space for that. You know, I'd like to leave some spiritual or emotional space for people to have their own relationship with the queen. You know, fair enough.
But why do the people of Great Britain and the Commonwealth nations have to pay for that shit? You know.
Yeah.
It's like I saw a video of Charles at a public, I don't know, it was a parade or something, and someone said, Charles, how can you live in luxury when we can't even heat our homes?
Yeah,
and then of course, you know, some Secret Service, or I don't know what they call them over there, ran over there, shut the fuck up, you know. And people holding signs
with a bobby stick.
Yeah, people holding signs were arrested or removed, and then someone just held up a blank sign, you know, to see what would happen. And the police or undercover police came over and questioned them. What's that? Oh, I'm just holding up a sign to see what would happen. Okay, well, we'll let you stand there.
And the rationale is always like, because it's gonna affect people's like mental health. You know, it's gonna traumatize people. That's such a weird...
bullshit. Such bullshit. Like if you criticize the president, you know, people are going to have meltdowns. I mean, right. By the way, British listeners, you know, the U.S. is certainly no better. The trend there is to have like fucking royal families with Clintons and, you know, Trumps and Bidens, Bushes. Oh my God. You know, like what is with these people? Cheneys, you know, fuck all these people. Like, how does this happen? Why are we so weak and cowardly and stupid that we just want to give up our autonomy and our critical faculties? Please save us. and then these like highly motivated sociopaths see their opportunity, and then they take it, you know, and then it's too late. You've already given up everything, and you're now subservient to those motherfuckers. This is making me angry, actually, when I'm thinking about this. It's unbelievable. We're doomed. We are doomed.
I think, what was the title?
We need a punk revolution.
I think one of...
No future.
Yeah, exactly. John Lydon had a book, I believe, something related.
Yeah, it's something like no dogs, no Irish, no.
Or I was going to say more about anger is an energy. That was the title of his 2014 book.
Well, that's from a song.
Okay.
Called Rise. Is it Rise? I think it's on Rise. May the road rise with you. That's probably Pill's best album, and it's called Album. Or if you buy it as a cassette, it's called Cassette. If you buy it as a CD, it's called CD. It's very Warholian.
Mm.
You understand what I'm saying? Like it's called Album.
Yeah, no, I got it. It's like meta.
Yeah. That's probably my favorite. But yeah, anger is an energy. See, I mean, this is why I'm conflicted about him. Like, some things he says seem to me completely stupid, and he's just like a a drunken. Sometimes I hear him interviewed. He's just like the most annoying, moronic, drunken uncle imaginable.
I saw him like coddling up to Pierce Morgan. It's like, come on, son.
Exactly. Or sometimes he's like asked to speak at these punk retrospective, I don't know, seminars or whatever. They do a documentary, and then of course they want to interview him, and he's just like interrupting everyone, talking over everyone. And then one of the Ramones said, this was hilarious. He said, You didn't even write the songs. That was Glenn Matlock. If it hadn't been for him, you'd be selling fish and chips somewhere. Shut the fuck up."
Nice. Nothing wrong with that, though.
Nothing wrong with that, but
working man's hero.
Yeah, but it certainly it put him in his place. But he didn't shut up. He just kept talking. He's so oblivious. He doesn't even hear anyone else talk. He just keeps babbling on about, like he's the authority on punk history and everything else. He can be quite annoying, but he has his moments. Anger is an energy. Give him credit for that, and give him credit for God Save the Queen and Anarchy in the UK especially.
Cool. Should we wrap it up?
Maybe so, yeah. What's next?
What's next is we're going to delve into Russian post-punk with the most famous Russian band, I would argue, called Kino.
Not Pussy Riot?
No. That's an art collective. No, but this is Kino. The front man, his name is Viktor Tsoi.
Okay.
And I think we'll look at the song Перемен, which means change. And
it's post-punk.
Post-punk, that's how it's usually classified.
All right.
So
more music.
Let's dive into the band Kino. And I'm excited for you to discover them, and maybe for some of our listeners. They have enjoyed some international fame already.
Kino, like cinema, like the German
exactly.
Kino?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. And
is that the Russian word, or is it the German
word?
word?
It's the same word.
Okay, it's the same. So like cinema, post-punk.
Yeah, and they kind of came to fame in the 80s, like during Perestroika, so a very interesting time. And Viktor Tsoi ended up dying kind of tragically, so he's kind of a martyr in Russian music now.
He's the Kurt Cobain of
Russian
absolutely pop.
Absolutely. And I'm wondering if Russia can find an equivalent in today's difficult times. So
okay,
looking for the modern Kino.
I know nothing about this, so I look forward to learning about it.
Awesome.
After that, I promise we'll get back to the topic of drugs. Probably we'll do that Gore Vidal essay first, and maybe give you some time to watch the Michael Pollan series on psychedelics.
Sounds gnarly. All right, everybody. God save the Queen!
She ain't no human being!
Exactly.
Texting.